I am an American, Indian, Native American, and grew up on a reservation in the upper Midwest. Our home was 35 miles from the nearest large grocery store. Winter can cause treacherous driving conditions as roads can become snow-packed and slippery quickly due to the rural area. One winter, when I was in my early teens, my mother and I drove to the grocery store during a snowstorm to shop for food and other items. The snowstorm had dumped a lot of snow overnight, so we made our purchases and immediately left for home. We left early and were returning in early afternoon. The 35-minute drive would normally take about 45 minutes, but the road was snow-packed, and there were no cars on the road. The wind was drifting the snow over the road, leaving a white plain where the road should have been, making it incredibly hard to see. My mother drove well below the speed limit to drive through drifting snow and not skid off the road. We were at somewhere around the midpoint of the drive and just past my uncle's house. We did not stop as my mother did not want to get stuck overnight due to the deteriorating road conditions. So we pressed on. Just past my uncle's house, the road goes over a hill with a long, gentle descent. The snow was falling lightly, and the wind had died down quite a bit, but the road was still covered. Only a long white path lay ahead of us. No tire marks were on either lane, as there had been no other car on the road. As we began to descend the hill, my mother noticed something on the road, so she began to slow the car to a crawl. At first, I thought it was just a log or a piece of wood lying across the road. As we came closer, my mother and I noticed it was a man lying across the road. He was wearing a short-sleeved white t-shirt, jeans with black boots. He was laying face up and his arms spread out, like he was trying to make a snow angel. His eyes were closed as he was just lying in the snow. My mother gradually brought the car to a stop and we stared at the man. Slowly, she backed the car up and managed to turn around. She said she wanted to go get my uncle for help. Slowly, we made our way back over the hill and my mother pulled into my uncle's driveway. She got out and went to the house. Soon my mother appeared with my uncle, who was carrying a blanket and another item. He got in and we turned around and started over the hill. No car had passed us, and the light was good as it was still early. My uncle was concerned, wondering if the man was hitchhiking and had been messed up by hypothermia or something like that. As we drove over the hill, my uncle was leaning forward, near the windshield, trying to see the man on the ground. As we approached where we stopped, we could see the man was no longer laying across the road. There was nothing. The snow beyond our tracks was untouched. We could see our tire tracks where we had stopped and where my mother turned around, but beyond that the snow on the road was untouched. No car tracks, no animal tracks, no footprints. My uncle got out of the car, saying maybe the man rolled into the ditch or walked after us. He began to search the road and both the ditches, but found nothing. He returned to the car and told my mom to continue into town, as he watched the ditches. Slowly we drove into town but never saw any cars on the road or any marks on the sides of the road. The man had simply vanished. My uncle told my mom to go to the police so he could report it, and then maybe get a ride back to his place with one of the patrolmen. My mother and I both reported the incident, and we returned home. I have no explanation for what my mother and I saw. I hope maybe somebody in the comments will be able to help us out. About 3 years ago, my ex-boyfriend, his 2 friends, my brother, and I went on a night hike. This place is an old, abandoned amusement park off the side of a mountain with access up to the mountain from the amusement park location. This place is well known to the locals, and most people hike there in the day. I have a video of me exploring the amusement park itself, with my very brave Boston Terrier. If anyone would like to see it, maybe I'll send it into the channel. My ex-boyfriend had this photo that he asked his friend to send him. At first glance, I assumed his friend had photoshopped the picture. I will also send this in the future if you guys would like to see it. I was skeptical, because who the heck just takes random pictures of nothingness? I live in a cold state, so we all bundled up and headed up the torn asphalt towards the amusement park. I still remember the air feeling quite still. There was a snowstorm predicted to happen on Christmas Day. so the air had this creepy stillness to it, which made it a lot more exciting. As we headed up the grassy hill passing the amusement park and towards the mountain, things were getting a little intense. My ex-boyfriend, who was my ex for an awfully specific reason, brought along his beloved PBRs. The higher we got up the hillside of the mountain, the drunker he got. When we finally reached the top, they came across a radio tower. This excited my ex and my brother because for some reason they found the need to climb it. I started panicking and told them to get down. At this point, it started misting out. It seemed like the start of the storm. The air was electrifying, and I was extremely anxious. I realized I could not change their mind. So, I did what I could do, and I walked away. I could not stand the idea of seeing my brother plummet to the ground or getting electrocuted. I walked away and towards the tree line. I walked until I reached the side of the rocky cliff. It was way more comforting to be alone even in the darkness. I stood there enjoying the view of the many streetlights twinkling down below. I remember taking deep breaths and just feeling a lot less anxious. The view is always beautiful during the day, but at night it is a whole new experience. It was great until my ex and the whole crew came to join me, except for the idea of joining me was hanging off the side of a cliff. Like literally cliffhanger style. Maybe they were inspired by those parkour videos. I don't know. But this set me off. Especially since my ex peer pressured my brother into doing it. I started to raise my voice and demanded them to stop. My ex found a small ledge off the side of the cliff to stand on. He yelled at me, "Come here right now. You need to see this." I looked over the side and saw the descent our bodies would have to travel until finally reaching the rock bottom. He just kept pushing me to stand on the small ledge. After some time, a stupid past version of me decided to give in. I inched my way to the ledge, and he told me to turn around and look at the view. I felt like I wanted to cry. He said, "Isn't it beautiful?" I've thought about the plummet. That is all. I wanted to climb back up to safety. I felt dizzy like the world around me was spinning. Finally, I climbed back up. My ex-boyfriend's foot slipped in front of me, and I surely thought that is when it was all over. He was able to catch himself, and I was just hyperventilating. I started to bawl my eyes out. They just would not stop playing that stupid cliffhanger stuff. My ex yelled at me and claimed I was crying to get attention from his two friends. This angered me. I tried to explain myself, but he would not listen. I was afraid for their lives. I was extremely shaken up and angry, so I decided to speed walk away from that whole thing. I walked and did not look back. I made my way through the brush and down the grassy hillside. I walked until I could not hear the ridicule from my ex or his criticizing laughter. When finally, I was all alone, by myself with my overreactive thoughts, with no light but just the moon above me as well as my dead phone. After about 20 minutes of walking, I started to reach the bottom of the hill. The abandoned amusement park buildings were to the left of me, and I had a clear view of the street in front of me. About a football field away, I noticed something that stopped me in my very tracks. I noticed a glowing figure made up of light almost floating up the street towards the amusement park. It was not any car lights because the gates of the amusement park were locked up. This was far away from any civilization to be some sort of illuminating light from a car. It was a figure, and a very tall one, about half the size of the trees around it. The figure illuminated the trees around it. It had massive wings. I distinctly saw what I saw, and as soon as I saw it, I crouched down into a ball with my head between my knees and cradled my head with my arms. I just wept. I was extremely scared and alone with no phone. I was afraid that this being would have seen me or done something to me. I was just way afraid to look up. I just sat there quietly sobbing and waiting to hear something, when after probably 10 minutes, I heard my boyfriend singing his stupid drunkard songs from a distance. When they saw me crying, he automatically assumed I was still upset, but when I explained what I had saw, they surprisingly believed me. We stood there staring out into the distance and finally decided to continue walking. We made it back to my car, but for quite a few days, I got very little sleep after this experience. I don't know what that creature was. I don't know if it had something to do with the poor weather conditions. I don't know if it's just something that haunts this mountain. But I'm never, ever going to explore that area, especially with those people. Not in the winter, not when it's snowing, and definitely not at nighttime. It was Christmas 2008, and I had awoken to a bright sunny Southern California day. Excited, full of energy, and full of emotions, prepared to head toward LAX so I could board my plane and fly across the country. That year, I was heading toward West Virginia to spend the holidays with friends and family. We would proceed to stay up every night watching movies, playing video games, and telling stories during my vacation there. I would go into more details with the fun and exciting things, including going ice skating, camping, and even feeding some deer in my friend's backyard, but I'm pretty sure you are not really interested in all that. Fair enough. Let us focus on the events leading up to my scary encounter, including the experience itself. Now, the reason I chose to fly on Christmas Day was because it was way cheaper, which, fun fact, if you travel during the season, choose the 25th. As you know, most families want to already be together on Christmas Day, which is why airlines choose to lower costs for customers on the holiday. Just an FYI. Anyways, I boarded my American Airlines flight at approximately 9 in the morning, and we took off close to around 9:45. The flight itself was boring, consisting of listening to audiobooks and having small conversations with a friendly woman who sat behind me. Fast forward to a little past 7 p.m. You must remember there is a 3-hour time difference between the East and West Coast time. We arrived at the airport on schedule. It had been snowing that evening, so I bundled up in extra layers with my comfortable boots, softening each of my steps. Once I grabbed my luggage, consisting of my carry-on and small suitcase, I head toward the shuttle system just outside the airport, which was to take me roughly an hour toward the small town that my friend lives in, and drop me off at her mom and dad's bakery. We had planned it this way because my friend, who in this story we'll refer to as Amanda, and her dad would be at the bakery working on some sweets for all of us to enjoy back at her house. Do not get me wrong, they did offer to come pick me up at the airport, and they insisted heavily that it was not an issue, but I insisted further that I would take a shuttle to them. So I did, and about an hour later, I am dropped off at my friend's bakery, and I am greeted by Amanda. "Where's your dad? Is it just you?" I asked Amanda, as she helps me get the snow-covered suitcase and carry-on into the back room. "Oh, he'll be right back. He went to go get some things from home." We proceeded to settle down inside the back room and talked for about 15 minutes or so, catching up and me telling her about my flight. Bear in mind, the lights in front of the bakery, where all the sweets are, including the cash register and displays, are off, and the "We Are Open" sign is set to closed. So, anyways, as we are talking, enjoying some cookies and milk, we suddenly heard a loud thud and shattering coming from the main lobby. Amanda and I quickly jump out of our seats, and then storm through the kitchen door only to be met with one of the worst sights you could possibly imagine. 2 hunky large figures, with black ski masks covering their face, black sweaters, matching pants, gloves, and boots, are now in the bakery and are armed. One has a crowbar, and the other has a handgun. I remember everything in slow motion, my life passing before my very own eyes. As the men tell us to be quiet and to show them where the money was located, otherwise we would be in a world of trouble, Amanda tells the men the cash register was empty, but the money was in the back room and placed inside a box. The men approached Amanda and we had briefly headed into the back room, Amanda pointing at said money box placed on a table, while the men have their backs turned toward us. We take this opportunity to book it out of the bakery, jumping through the shattered front window and running across the street to a small shopping center. Naturally, everything was closed. It was Christmas after all, so the overall feeling of being isolated without anyone near us for help as it snowed in the darkness was a very real and very scary feeling. Amanda and I both hid behind a large dumpster, keeping a watchful eye on the shop. As Amanda called her dad to warn him about the 2 armed men, her dad asked us if we are safe. We assure him that we are fine and we are hidden behind a dumpster on the other side of the street. Amanda's dad then advises us to call the police. He then says he would be there in about 5 minutes with a shotgun. Too bad he did not get there in time, nor did the police, because almost as soon as we are on the line with 911, the 2 men come racing out of the bakery with the money box I mentioned and run in the complete opposite direction into an alleged alleyway. 20 seconds later, A black minivan, which we assumed housed the two robbers, was storming down the street and disappears into the cold, dark West Virginia night. Sadly for Amanda and her family, they ended up losing a few $1,000s that evening, having to cover costs for the damages and the money stolen. But when all was said and done, they were just so thankful nothing bad happened to either me or their daughter. Nothing was stolen from my belongings, which I was thankful for, as I had all their gifts wrapped neatly in my suitcase. Now, even though we stayed at the bakery longer than expected talking with the police and filing a police report, we eventually returned to Amanda's house at roughly 2 in the morning to open presents and try to get our minds off of what was truly the most frightening experiences of our lives. The police never did catch the men, but in what was perhaps one of the greatest acts of kindness, the town folks came together to help raise the funds for Amanda's family to cover the losses from that cold and scary Christmas evening.